This is reposted.
Keller, have you heard of the song "I Took a Pill in Ibiza"?
Yeah, I like that song. It's
God,
it's the quintessential club song, I think, in my opinion.
really? God,
Yeah.
I love that song. Me and my kids used to play that all the time. I love the video. I love everything about it. It's written by a guy named Mike Posner. Read a really cool article about him in Outside Magazine about him walking across the United States. He became this famous dude in LA, hanging out, needed some change in his life, so he decides to skosh across the country. Fascinating article. At one point, he takes his headphones off and walks in silence, has some pretty cool epiphanies. He gets bitten by a snake, has to be airlifted to a hospital. Today's quote comes from his song, Move On, that says, "Beginnings always hide themselves in the end." So we've kind of talked about this before. Time is a construct of man, like squirrels don't have clocks. Ends also are beginnings and ends are kind of relative, right? Because your beginning might be my end and my end might be your beginning. So what do you think he's saying by beginnings always hide themselves in the end?
I mean, it's you start doing something and where you end up is like you find the reason why you started. Like there was a reason why it happened. Like he walked across the country not knowing what he was going to find and had epiphanies throughout. We started this show not knowing what it would be, and it's become something. I find this guy really interesting, and it made me think of, I think, I don't know when this is going to air, but yesterday we talked about Sister Mary Joseph, and she did 60 years of her life and then like went introspective, and probably because she had kids she did it later in life. This guy got to the pinnacle of success and was like, well, my friends have died, my dad just died, I need to find something different. So he did it sooner in his life and had epiphanies, and I think it was really cool.
Since we're talking about things we've just recently talked about on our other show, we talked about a guy who ran 100 triathlons in 100 days. I was thinking in the middle of that, what is the beginning and the end? We talked about how all he did all day long was go on a triathlon, and then you wake up and you do it again the next day. Like, where's the beginning and end and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's the the beginning is having a crazy idea, and then the middle is just attrition. And he probably, I mean, he learned something on the other end of it. I did the 3-day fast, and I mean, I've done it before, but like you kind of learn some things through that. You might have learned more than I did on like, oh, I need to reset how I eat. I think one of the big things that stood out to me about Mike Posner that's might not be as obvious from reading it is that he has the ability to take this break from life, not because he's wealthy, but because he's unattached and without kids. I mean, it's great to find yourself by walking across the country, but like there is something about having commitments in life that inhibit you from doing that. And so I guess maybe it's important to find yourself before you make longer commitments.
What I like about this idea is just kind of going back to the, like, you're training for a marathon and you kind of put your wheels, you put your focus down on all you do is run and run and run and run. And then what happens the minute you finish the marathon? That is now the beginning, right? You finished it, you've been focusing, and then I've never run one, but do you then get the epiphany of like, well, what am I going to do with my time now?
I think that probably hits you the next day or the day after. I've never done a full marathon. I've done, I think, 4 or 5 half marathons. So yeah, there is some version of like, oh, I'm training. This is my purpose. I think rarely the average person goes back to training immediately because what are you really going to do with that? So
I
yeah.
was also sort of thinking some other ideas there, like my father-in-law retired in the last 5 years. So it's the beginning of his retirement, but it's his end of his work career. So
Mhm.
it's like at the beginning of a new start of your life. What do you do when you wake up the next day? Like, "Well, I'm done working for the rest of my life."
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. Another thing that Mike Posner talks about, like being at the end, like his father died, and he says a lot of people try to convince you that your life is never going to end, and that's why you end up working for them as opposed to doing things for yourself. Like he said, I walked across the country for me. I started doing shows again for me, and he was doing these things earlier in his life because he thought that's what he was supposed to do. I had a version of that being like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to climb the ladder. I'm supposed to achieve these milestones. And then after hitting them, you're like, well, who am I doing this for? And being introspective is pretty good too. So seeing an end in something else could be a new beginning for you.
That's interesting because I've always wondered why. I mean, you've done the acting thing pretty well in San Francisco, and then you go like, I want to do it full time. So you moved to LA to do it. And I feel like what you're saying is maybe like you can't really start it unless you really begin it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like you could have done it half-ass,
Oh,
kind of,
yeah.
sort of, kind of in San Francisco. But you're like, you know what? I really wanted to start and do it well, so I got to end that phase of my life and begin a new one.
Yeah, in our few hundred episodes, I've probably said this before, but I'm more scared of wondering what could have been than
Yeah.
failing and having my ego hurt. And that's kind of what it was. I was like, oh, I can do acting part time in San Francisco and do whatever, but you're not going to make a living doing it unless you're in New York and LA. At least at that point in time, who knows what the future of entertainment is? But yeah, have you ever gotten to the end of something and said, oh, this isn't what I thought I was going to get from it, but I learned something different?
This is really a bad example of that, but I feel like, sometimes not now, but when I was in relationships, like boyfriend, girlfriend relationships, you always think like, ooh, maybe that woman would be better for me than the one I'm with. And like one time I broke up thinking that would be better and it wasn't better. It just like was fictionally only better, but you can't know that until you can't do like if you're dating two gals at once, it doesn't really work because you're never really fully into one. You got to end one, start a new one. Then sometimes it doesn't work out the way you think it will.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is a pretty good example though. Dating is like you date people and it gives you data points on what you want in a partner. I mean, maybe you get lucky and the very first person you ever date, you end up marrying, but the way I saw dating was, okay, I understand this is what I need for myself and what I don't want in someone else. And so my phone rang. And so it's like the beginning, like you started it so you could get to the end to find something new, and you wouldn't have found that if you hadn't gone on the journey. So yeah, I think dating is a perfect example.
I sometimes take things that happened to me personally from the universe. Like I go like, oh, I can't believe I'm waiting in this line. We mentioned that a bunch of times. So Posner's on this walk across America and he gets bitten by this snake, right? And you think like he's got this focused journey to get across the United States, but he has this epiphany when the snake bites him that it's not the end. Like he's going to get past this. And I love this idea that he kind of let go of an obstacle getting in his way to get the journey done. And he was like, it's going to be okay. I'm going to continue. This is a good break. I get to see people again. I get to get in a helicopter ride. He really has this great attitude about getting bit by a snake while walking across the country.
Yeah, I mean, he said it gave him perspective on life, and probably it was, I think, a near-death experience. He was in the ICU for 5 days and had to relearn how to walk because his leg was so swollen. So yeah, I mean, I think basically take a step back and reprioritize what's going on in your life because the end is closer than you think. Ooh, it's dark.
Can we do some more clubbing? I like when you bring your clubbing outfit to the podcast.
Yeah. Well, for anyone that's only listening to this, I am wearing my best club attire. I just took some Molly. It didn't hit during the show, but hopefully I have a good afternoon. If you want to reach out, you can find us on Reposted Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I'm Andrew for the Club Rat. Thanks for stopping by.